Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for Action Agenda live from the Blueprint Conference. And I am thrilled to have some of the best and brightest in our industry here joining us today. So I'm going to introduce them all to you and let them say hello. First, we have Jillian Fickert. Jillian.
Everyone. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing at Buckingham Communities based in Indiana. So excited to be here with this group to kind of talk about all of our takeaways.
We're thrilled to have you. Thank you, Jillian.
Thanks.
And do you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Ann Baum. I'm the marketing director at Town Properties. We are located in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you, Jillian and Mark. It's good to see you again. And Chelsea, always good to see you.
Thank you. Mark, if you'd like to say hello and introduce yourself as well.
Sure. My name's Mark Jepson. I'm the founder and CEO of a sustainable focused development company based in Minneapolis called Parkera. We're a startup development company really trying to green the planet and the built environment. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that today in the context of Blueprint. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Y'all, thank you all so much for joining us. I know we already cracked a little joke in our pre-show discussion about how you're in a much better environment and climate than I am in Texas. It is still hot here. I'm jealous of everyone's fall that you're having while we're still burning up. But let's talk a little bit about how amazing the Blueprint Conference was. I'm sure the weather was on point, but I would love to hear from all of you. What was it about this conference that really stood out to you and made it feel different and gave it a little bit of a different vibe? Because I'm hearing from lots of folks who attended that they just really loved that this conference was different than some of the other industry conferences we've been to. Jillian, would you like to tell us a little bit first about your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So I loved the integration of VCs, of startups, of property management professionals, and really kind of getting together and building relationships and having conversations. The structure of the conference was phenomenal, where everything was kind of really close together and you could bop around and kind of take in everything. It wasn't, walking across an entire casino in Vegas, which I know a lot of us have, done before to try and get to the next session. Everything was really attainable. And it made for a lot of really great conversations and connections. So it just really felt refreshing to me.
It sounds like it was a smaller, more intimate venue that really helped with that. Okay, perfect.
For sure.
And tell us a little bit about what was your favorite part of this?
So I agree with Jillian. I didn't really know what to expect. This was my first time at Blueprint, and right away, I loved the fact that it was a mixed group of, investors, like Jillian said, investors, VCs, prop tech, multifamily, hospitality. And although there was a multifamily track, I did feel comfortable going to the other tracks. And I actually felt like I learned a lot, both from the general sessions and then like the hospitality track, I learned a lot from. And just everyone was so open. I think the best conferences are the ones where the attendees are willing to, you sit down at a table and people are willing to talk to you and they want to introduce themselves. And I felt that all day, every day at Blueprint. And I felt like I walked away with not only a lot of knowledge, but new connections.
I love that. I know Jillian had made a comment about that too, that the relationships here seemed really focused on that. So Mark, what about you?
I agree with what both Jillian and Ann said, and I maybe take a little different tact. I like the format. I think the plenary sessions, the small breakouts, which were very detailed, and we'll probably talk a little bit about some of the learnings from those. Yeah. And then on the front end of the deal on Tuesday, the conference really ran kind of all week. I was able to attend the Fifth Wall Climate Conference. So they had it was like a conference in a conference with kind of a deep dive for a day as well. So you got really immersive content plus great plenary speakers plus the other, which was, when you looked at the whole ecosystem and all of the different groups that were there, like we talked about, it was truly unique. I've gone to these things for a very long time, as I'm sure everybody has. This is the best conference I've been to in 10 years, just in terms of just in terms of takeaway value for all the reasons they mentioned in it. And you came out of it energized. Sometimes it's kind of like you're dragging on the back end, but I felt really energized with great thought leaders across spectrums that I normally wouldn't see in that kind of environment. So it was awesome.
That is really saying something and absolutely incredible. And I love that our industry as a multifamily industry is really starting to expand to learn from other sectors, other groups, other industries. I think a lot of us have been saying that for a long time, that we really like to learn from others so that we're not just all in an echo chamber. So I love that this conference helped with that. So speaking of those sessions and speaking of kind of your key takeaways and the things that you loved, I would love to hear from each of you either your favorite session or the favorite thing that you took away from one of the sessions. I know that Jillian, I saw one of the things that you sent to me said, protect your Mavericks. And I thought that sounded really cool. I had no idea exactly what it meant, but I know you had some awesome takeaways. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So there was a session with a gentleman from Amherst who was telling his story about a development in Dubai. And that alone was interesting enough.
That was a great session.
It was totally a great session. And just, learning about the entire process and just kind of thinking about what the scope of that is and all of the pieces. And what I loved as well is that he humanized it in talking about even his experience with his family and kind of showed how he intertwined his sons into that experience as well. But the way he framed up the entire conversation was around, let me say, I have some notes here. So it was 5 lessons in innovation. So, and they're really, really simple. And like right away, I'm like, okay, this is a wonderful way to be able to quickly have these snippets of tips on something that is so incredibly complicated in a development in another country. So let me just go through them really quick because I think that they were really amazing. So it was, you are who you hang out with.
Yep.
You need to operationalize the innovation, innovate to a vision, innovation is relative, and protect your mavericks. So, we could have a whole entire call just on all of these topics, but I think that those simple takeaways, when you stop to think about how that impacts what we're doing every day in multifamily, what Mark's doing to innovate in a different space, like having those little taglines just makes you think about things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I love all of those. And I think they're easy to remember and to stick with. So I love that you brought back these like quick snippets for folks to really think about. I'm going to highlight one of those. And then, Anne, I want to talk to you about it because I think it kind of transitions well to some of your key takeaways. But operationalize the innovation. I love that thought. I know in a previous discussion in our, what I'm going to call world famous demo day, we had talked about not adopting technology just for technology's sake. And I know there's such a lot of conversation right now about AI and centralization and moving things along and, all of that. So Anne, tell me a little bit, because I know some of your key takeaways were around innovation and strategy and how to do all of that. What do you think about that? How are you going to operationalize the innovation, or how do you think your team should start to look at this?
Yeah, and I did. I love that session, and that was one of the general sessions. He followed the Property Brothers, which, by the way, that was my personal favorite because they talked a lot about brand, which I'm on a kick right now, and very much they are a brand. They know who they are. They protect their brand. They are who they say. I mean, just phenomenal. But I think in terms of operationalizing the innovation, something else that I took away from that session was that innovation doesn't always have to be the next big thing. It can be something simple, but if it has a purpose, and so, not implementing technology for technology's sake, for example, but if it has a purpose and if it drives change and value within the business, then you are innovating. And so I think anytime we want to make a change, it's really important to think about what is the process? Why are we doing this? And how are we going to implement it so that it is digestible across the organization?
Yeah. Mark, speaking of innovation that blew your mind, what was your session or thing that you were like, wow, this is a wild thought? What do you have for us?
Yeah, it was really, it was both a wild thought and really kind of bringing together a bunch of my already wild thoughts. But I, and I think on the brand and kind of like coalescing all this together, Jillian and Ann and I are kind of kindred spirits coming at this all differently, but to a similar spot. But I sat in on a kind of a breakout or a work session around digital twins.
Okay.
And I kind of went into it with that concept out in the ether somewhere where I kind of heard of it, but I didn't really kind of operationalize it. And we've spent, so the building showing behind me is a prototype building in the Twin Cities that we're raising equity for now. And we've spent 3 years really building a platform under Parkera with IP. So this is trademarks and service marks and brand identity. And we're a certified B Corp and doing all this pre-work to get to a point to build our prototype. Well, with the digital twin, you can take that prototype, three-dimensionalize it, and then take some of the technology that you have. So there's a lot of discussion in the industry about leak detection. And this is a podium building with an integrated heating and cooling system that drops the energy use by 70% over a typical podium building anywhere in the US. And so by doing that, all that data gets digitized along with the digital twin. And now you can run the building and see that in real time. So the power of that for a brand standpoint is we can share that we can share that information with our residents. We can share it with our investors, all our stakeholders. And the ability to pull all that together, because you guys all know, I mean, real estate, I mean, you got to go see it. It's local. You got to touch it. And so when you've got a prototype, a lot of people can't visualize it, where you can three-dimensionalize it plus put the data against it. I just thought was amazing. And the costs that were shared, don't know whether those are real. That's my to-do coming out of the conference. But the costs weren't enormous. I mean, we're talking, mid 5 figures cost to implement something like that. So for a $50 to $100 million asset, that's pretty reasonable. So I was kind of blown away by the whole thing. And it ties into some of the stuff we'll talk about related to sustainability and data and carbon and a bunch of other stuff. So and I didn't use the word AI in there anywhere. Yeah.
I was going to say, we've been talking about technology for a real estate technology conference for a whole almost 15 minutes, and no one has said AI yet. What is happening? Aliens have taken over the world.
We're clearly not cool enough yet. So,
But I think this really goes to show that there's so much more to innovation and to real estate technology and to where our industry is going. That's not just AI. I love AI just as much as the next person, but there's so much that's happening and it's evolving so quick. I couldn't help but think, and please forgive me for everyone hearing this who's going to now know that I'm old, for all of us who've been in this industry for many, 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 many moons, a digital twin, like what that, I cannot imagine talking to my first manager way back when and being like, guess what? Someday your building's going to have a digital twin. It's like such a wild thought. Yeah.
Well, one of the things when I started on my tech journey in multifamily, let's say 7 or 8 years ago, I'm not exactly sure. And, prop tech became a thing, and a lot of companies started investing in venture funds that were focused on prop tech. And one of the things that kind of came to me as I was sitting there listening to digital twins and kind of where the industry's going is, early on it was locks, just like here's the smart locks. So smart locks, everybody had smart locks, and we had all the smart locks. Now there are still great smart lock companies, but in 7 or 8 years it's moved where, and there were SPACs for smart locks and all kinds of other stuff that happened, in the last 5 or 6 years. And now it's so much more integrated. So when we talk about customer experience or tracking carbon or all this, and that's going back to the conference, that's the great thing about the conference is you had all those folks there in like kind of one venue. So it wasn't like you heard something and there was nobody you could talk to say, okay, explain more about this to me. So it was great.
I love that it sounds like to me, and I will say my jealousy knows no bounds. Like I am so jealous that I couldn't be there. But it sounds like to me there were so many subject matter experts in every vertical that you could ever imagine that you were able to get your questions answered. You were able to scratch that curiosity itch and really find out more and kind of dive deeper into conversations and technology than maybe previously has happened at conferences. And I think that's a really cool thing that happens here at Blueprint. So speaking of all of this, I do want to hear from each of you. What was one specific idea or technology that you're planning to either implement or, dig a little deeper into now? And I know, Mark, we talked about for you digital twins. So I'm going to ask, Anne, do you have a specific thing that you were like, this is the thing that I walked away and thought, okay, I want to learn more. I need to understand more. What is it for you?
Oh, I have two, so I hope that's okay. Jillian and Mark. No, I'm just kidding. But so I think two things. One, I've already been kind of on this brand, the idea of how do we define our brand and measure the success and implementation of our brand, of our property management brand within our properties. And so that was just reinforced to me. I went to a session, it was called The Surge of Branded Residential. I'll be real, I didn't know what branded residential was, but that was okay. And I went and it was I was like, cool brand, but it was Hyatt Hotels, Airbnb, Proper Hotel, and Ennismore were the panelists. And branded residential is basically when like a hotel brand builds a residence and then sells the units within the residence. And they were just talking about how it's really important that these residences match their brand and how there's a resurgence. And they talked a lot about Miami. I guess it's a really popular market. But anyway, the stat that I took away from that was that they are able to charge a 25 to 30% premium for units in branded residential because of the brand associated with the building. And I was like, okay, this just aligns with kind of the other conversations about how important brand is. People are willing to pay for something they trust, and how can we implement that in multifamily. So that, like I said, it reinforced something that I'd already been thinking about. And then the other thing that I liked getting exposure to at Blueprint was the idea of like data lakes, data warehousing, data cleansing, data visualization from multiple sources into one platform. And there were a couple sessions around that. I met a vendor who was really great, who provides that service as well. And so it was just interesting to hear. Those are such big ideas. A data lake, that's a huge idea, and it's almost difficult to wrap your arms around. But I was able to go up to a panelist after one of the sessions and ask her specifically, like, tell me about the journey you went through to create, a data department, and what did that process look like? And I wouldn't have had that access. I just felt very fortunate that I had access to ask her those questions in kind of a non-judgmental, in a safe space. And so that was really, really cool.
And I hate to harken back to this again, but I cannot get over the thought of I've been in the industry for about 23 years. And in that time, we've gone from handwritten ledgers to data lakes. Like the pace of change is wild. But speaking of resident experiences and brand and all of that good stuff, I know that was really a common theme throughout the conference because we are all seeing residents are staying longer. We're hopefully going to have our occupancy picking back up again soon because I know some of our markets are seeing a little bit of softening. But I wanted to ask you, Jillian, what did you take away as far as resident experience or the importance of customer experience, since this is kind of a theme throughout?
Yeah. So I think one of the themes that we're seeing here, as well as elsewhere, but it was really interesting in this tech space of, the continued thought process of meeting that resident where they want to be and continuing to evolve our technology. And a couple of things that Anne had said earlier with, making sure that, the brand is where it needs to be, that what we are portraying is actually what we are delivering. And I think that that was laced into a lot of the conversations, kind of going back to the Property Brothers conversation. That was a big piece of, what they were talking about in their brand of, hey, we're not just going to slap our name on something. Yes. This means something to us. And I think that we all need to think about that too, from, every piece of tech that we're providing and how does that portray us. One of the conversations that we had at a roundtable together was, what does this look like when we're using all of the tech and how is that communicating for us as us? And sometimes we're not as in tune with, this product is sending out a message and, people think it's coming from us. Are we really in tune with the full view of how we're communicating and what that resident experience is? And I think as we kind of dive into some of these tech spaces, and especially with newer companies, one of the things that I really loved was that there were companies that were still dipping in places that like I already have solutions for, but maybe they're doing things a little bit differently. And it just sparked so much conversation of, okay, like we've crossed that bridge, we've gone down the AI bridge, but you can't be stagnant anymore. So having some of these really innovative conversations with the thought process on the resident experience, and, are we partnering with, the latest and greatest, and are they thinking about the full circle piece of it, was really, really important to what the takeaways were from this.
Yeah, and I can't help but think that a lot of what residents are looking for is changing as our resident demographic changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, Mark, you and I have talked a lot about this, and I know that you had some takeaways around the climate and sustainability initiatives and how important that's going to be to our residents. So tell me a little bit about that on your end.
Well, yeah, maybe I'll come back to that. Could I take a little different path, maybe to jump into what Ann and Jillian said?
Yeah.
So I often say, purpose-driven brands win the future.
Yep.
So I think being able.
Hold on, let everybody write that down. Repeat that, Mark. Everybody grab your pen.
Purpose-driven brands win the future. So, and I think purpose is broad enough that companies have the ability to define an operating purpose or something. Like for us, it's nature and sustainability, and we kind of connect to that. But connect to it how you will. And what I took away, and maybe it's less of a technology, it's more of a case study in the industry, because we're out in the market now, kind of preaching, if you will, our message around purpose-driven brands and why that's powerful and where there's great value unlocks there, kind of like Jillian was mentioning. And the comparison I would make, and that was made at the conference, was really to how do you create alpha? How do you outperform the market in terms of value?
Yep.
And they used the build to rent example. That wasn't a category. Again, going back 6-7 years ago. So we believe, when you start looking at purpose, again, our project and our prototype, there's a connection, say, in the Class A space. Around somebody who sits between a conventional Class A renter and somebody who's in the build-to-rent space. Traditional apartment renters stay about 2 years. Traditional build-to-rent folks stay about 4 years. Why is that? We're finding these little value segments in the industry. It used to be apartments. Renters have a certain profile. That's getting so much more broad now. And so I think when I think about resident experience, find your space, build your purpose, and then align your residents to that. And there's these case studies now of people doing that all over the place, which is really exciting because it gives room to innovate. The one thing that came out of the conference that isn't there yet, which I took away, is the capital markets, debt, equity are like way behind.
Yeah.
So at the same time, we had one of the plenary sessions where they talked about how we want to find alpha. We want to find the next build to rent. Mm-hmm. And yet the markets really have been seized up. And the speaker, who was from I think the state of Texas pension fund, said, it's probably 2 or 3 more years before it becomes normal again. Mm-hmm. And so we're in this weird phase where we're trying to define these new things, and yet we've got to go find debt and equity, and things cost more. And I'm talking about ground up development. And so anyway, I think the resident experience really is so open for us to define now. We've just got to do things like this to communicate, to bring all the sources along, capital and pension funds, sovereign wealth. We got to grow the group that believes, that there's more that can be done in the multifamily space. So anyway.
I love that. And I love that we're seeing some folks who are really pioneering into a niche to help build that. And Mark, obviously, you're one of them. I know, Ann, you're building your brand too to make that niche. And Jillian, you've always been a pioneering person in our space. So I think that's incredible. Did you guys notice any particular emerging technology, like any particular thing, and it doesn't even have to be by name of a supplier or vendor, not necessarily, but like, what was that one thing that you were like, man, this is really going to be a game changer for the multifamily industry moving forward. Mark?
I'll go first. Can I do that?
Yeah.
And I'll answer your prior question that I didn't answer because I went back. So and I'll do a pitch for well, actually, I can't even do it on my
Oh yeah.
from green to ESG. Matt Ellis's book From Measurable.
Oh
So
yeah.
so they're doing great work. Everybody, as operators, likes data. We talked a lot about data,
Yep.
but and just for the folks who are listening, if you go to Measurable's website now, they have a carbon index they're creating with the London Stock Exchange that allows you to take REIT and publicly available data and benchmark yourself. And they have a multifamily segment for that where you can benchmark yourself against carbon. And it's free. You don't have to pay for it. You can go and see and then you can collect your own data and find it. I just thought, and the idea is there. I think of it a little bit like audit. If you went back, Chelsea, you were saying, when you had hand ledgers, maybe a long time ago, you didn't have audit, you didn't have gap accounting, you didn't have Basel, a lot of these financial metrics. Well, that's coming to multifamily, and it's coming to sustainability and carbon and a lot of these other metrics. And as that standardizes, it's going to become, because the argument that you always hear is, well, this is kind of squishy, and how do I know, and what methodology do I use? Well, it's coming, and companies like Measurable are doing that, and they're great advocates for that. And I was super impressed with the energy and the fact that not only are they doing it, but they're making it publicly available at no cost right now, so you can begin thinking about it. And the one thing I would say that I've learned over the last 3 years as we work through this is you just don't pick up sustainability or carbon and like jump in. I mean, there's a learning curve there that's big, and so to have these folks kind of leading the way is super powerful.
Man, it seems like it has just never been more important to continue our education in our industry in all of these different areas. Yeah. I'm just sitting here thinking about, there's so much that I don't know. And I thought I've been doing a great job of keeping up. And it's so important to attend these conferences and talk amongst ourselves with other industry leaders and figure out how to jump on these challenges and learn from each other. So thank you. Yeah, Mark. And do you have a particular technology or, one thing that you were like, this is going to change our industry in the future?
I don't necessarily have like one, but what I thought was wonderful about the format of the conference was that there was an app and vendors could set up meetings with attendees, and they were 15-minute meetings at tables. And so what struck me about that, again, was all of the conversations were very casual and getting to know the why behind the products. That's what I noticed a lot, is that when I spoke with vendors, they were talking to me a lot about why they had decided to start their prop tech company. And I thought that was really neat. And also there was an innovation stage. And so vendors would get up and talk about their product on this innovation stage, and you could kind of come and go. So no, I don't really have one thing that I was like, oh my gosh, but I did love getting to know the why. And then I just love the format of being able to very easily meet with a lot of vendors and learn about them without necessarily taking away from the learning portion of the conference.
Yeah, a conference format change, I think, is revolutionary for our industry overall. So that's incredible. And I also love that you talked with different companies about their why. I was just listening to someone who was telling me some other conference takeaways that they had, and they were telling me about someone who spoke that they innovate from frustration. Like every time that they're frustrated, they try to figure out how to solve this problem with a new innovation, or is there an answer to this problem that they could make, or a company they could create to solve this? And I thought that was such a fascinating thing. And so now I'm interested at every company that I talk to, and I'm like, what was so frustrating that you had to fix it with this,
What problem are you solving?
Yeah. So I love to hear the why behind the creation of a product or software or whatever it is. Jillian, what about you, my friend?
Yeah, so it was very similar to Anne. I think that this conference was different for me because it wasn't necessarily marketing,
Yeah.
sales, centralization, focus that we see at a lot of the larger conferences or just specifically multifamily conferences. So it wasn't, the usual characters that we see. And it actually opened up a lot of time to have conversations with people that didn't even have a dedicated space, a booth,
Mhm.
which I really enjoyed having conversations with those that were just starting out and were introducing themselves. I don't know how many times I introduced myself to someone just kind of standing there and they're like, I'm a founder. And I'm like, oh, tell me more. Tell me
Yep.
more about what you're doing. And then sparking like, well, have you thought about this? Well, this is, something that we have trouble with, kind of, working from that frustration space.
Yeah.
So very similar in that, but I think the exposure to all of those different types of groups and it not just being the standard, group of people that you see at every conference and you have those conversations with and you're picking back up after the last sales call. It was really meaningful conversations about products that are going to eventually be the ones that we're talking about, every day, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love that. I was just reading Paul Bergeron made a comment here in our chat that he said the most interesting vendor, in his opinion, was a company that's pronounced as Clue that decodes consumer preferences of your
Yeah.
residents so you can better appeal to them. And again, wow, right? The thought that we are now able to use data in that way to make better choices for our residents and our like the consumer experience is now even being talked about at that level is pretty impressive. What
Yes.
else, guys, are some other things that you were like, I loved this particular thought or this particular session? Did you have another piece that you were like, I can't wait to tell someone about this when you get home?
Oh my gosh, I have, like, so many I sent you my notes. I have,
I
like,
know
so many I've literally been sharing my like,
all of
sending
it.
my notes, like,
Yeah.
not even, like, unsolicited. I'm like, "Hey, you guys want my notes?"
I love it. And I love a fellow nerd in this space. And I hope it's okay for me to say that out loud because anyone who goes, okay, listen, and then goes into a long, spiel of what they learned is just my kind of people. So tell us, what was one of your other favorite takeaways?
Oh my gosh. Well, I definitely loved seeing, kind of the titles of like innovation, strategy, data. I thought that was really, looking at the panelist and seeing those titles, I thought that was it was just interesting and
Yeah.
that was actually one of my top takeaways, but I don't I don't know. You'll have to go to
No,
Mark or
you'll
Jillian.
have
I feel like I have overall, it was just a wonderful
so
conference,
much.
and
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I felt like I learned so much, but,
Well, let's
I
talk
would
about this. It seems
yeah.
like our industry is innovating so much, and roles, especially on site and the way we manage, is changing incredibly. So, what from this conference did you think about what the future might look like in our space? I love to think about not just 10 years from now, although my goodness, I couldn't have thought in a million years where we are now 10 years ago. But when we look to the future of multifamily, coming at it from the lens of the Blueprint Conference, what could you imagine changes happening in the future? And anybody who wants to take that one, feel free to start us off.
I mean, I can jump in, and I'm seeing Paul in the chat kind of talking about centralization, and I think that if we go back, like you've said, to some of the comments here already, if we were thinking about what this looked like previously, if you
Yeah.
mentioned some of these words, would be like, what are you talking
Right.
about?
Yeah.
And I think acknowledging that every company and every vertical does things differently,
Mhm.
and we're not set to, this is how you do it, this is how you roll it out, and that's it. And I think that the opening the mindset of multifamily that to take in that hospitality, we always talk about hospitality, but
Yeah.
really taking in
Yeah.
best practices from, other areas of real estate development. I think that we don't do it enough.
Mhm.
We are kind of in a bubble. And I think the more opportunity like this, and, if we could spread this further, it's going to just make us all better. And I think it's figuring out how to do that.
You mean not just saying, well, that's the way we've always done it? As I was told for like the first 10 years in the industry, which I'm so glad we're getting away from. Y'all, look how good we've done. I mean, we should all give everyone a pat on the back for getting out of that bubble and changing and being more open-minded to all of the innovation, because things are really different. And I think part of what's driven that is our residents and our now consumers, as we're starting to call them more and more frequently, are pushing for things to be different and really want a different experience. Mark, do you have anything around this idea of what the future of multifamily might look like?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a little bit of the future is now, but it's going to evolve quite a bit. I sat in on one of the roundtable sessions on Wednesday, I think, was about energy as a service. Which is kind of a super wonky topic. So I'll try to and it's not a thing that I have expertise in, but I'm again, a little bit like some of the other things I mentioned, I'm learning as we go with a lot of good advisors. But it's really about the idea, you know, if you think traditionally, so it's built on the thesis that energy costs are going to go up. And, you know, from the conference, if you look at what data centers are using and the power demand going up, and it probably drives energy costs up. And traditionally, in a lot of multifamily across the country, that energy cost is borne by the residents. So they're dealing separately with the utility, or, you know, maybe there's a RUBS, you know, coming across. But energy as a service really says, as the operator, you take back the energy and then you resell energy using renewables or other things to the resident, and you're controlling much more of that process. And out of that then comes a bigger discussion around kind of this PropCo OpCo model, where as you build your brand, you have an OpCo that might manage energy or experience or all these other things much more holistically. And then and you would raise equity or manage equity within that entity. And then you have the PropCo, which is just a real estate asset delivering traditional returns, and they're more linked. I think that's a super powerful idea. Not easy to implement, you know, in legacy companies that have, you know, hundreds, maybe thousands of entities in some instance. But I think the technology and where we're going on some of this will drive that change. And I thought that was the fact that that's being talked about in a very detailed fashion, and particularly on the energy as a service. There was one of the guys at my table with the company in Atlanta, and he's doing that now in retrofit situations where they're putting solar in, selling the solar back, you know, either to the energy provider or using it for the residents and the owner in a kind of a partnership deal. I thought was super powerful and much needed. So.
Well, I will say, as much as we're trying to forget in Texas the great freeze, as we call it, but a survivor of that, if I were a renter and you could guarantee that I would have energy and that I would have power regardless, like, man, what a market to grab onto, because that is an everyday fear for folks who are living in places where the grid is not, let's say, always sustainable. Nobody just Texas and tell them I said that, but it's a really interesting idea for the future.
Look at the hurricane that hit Houston a few months ago, you know, and just the downtime there. And can you build resiliency? Are you able to kind of manage that or not? You know, how do you think about the risk in that scenario?
Yeah, which leads us to a conversation too that we'll talk about in just a second. But Anne, did you have something to say on this?
Yeah, Mark sparked my memory. I'm like, oh my gosh, no. So two things that I took away that are kind of like the future, and they were kind of challenges in a good way in some of the sessions, were kind of the call to think about what asset class might be next. And so there was someone talking about like they basically own these like refrigeration facilities, like these warehouses, but they refrigerate things, and then they are a logistics company as well. And he was just kind of talking about like, think about what asset class might be next. Like, is it grain silos? Is it parking lots? And they were kind of talking about how they innovate. They have like 50 data scientists on their team, by the way, which was insane. And they're an integral part of their operations now. But they were talking about kind of, they determined that for things that can move slower from a logistics standpoint, they're using trains now, because like one train car equals 3 trucks on the road. And so that was interesting because it was an innovation, but it was like going back. I mean, trains are kind of thought of as like maybe, I don't know. So that was really cool. And then the other session was a man who was developing towns.
Wow.
And yeah, it was amazing. And so he talked a lot about the idea of he developed a town called Seabrook, Washington, and it was based on a town in Florida. But the premise was that everything was within a certain mile radius so that residents could walk, and it really brought back community. And so basically rethinking developing towns the way that towns used to be developed. And so
That was a
I
really good
think,
one.
yeah, that was really, really fascinating. And I think it goes a lot back to like the resident experience that we're talking about too.
Yeah, I've been thinking so much about that, and that brings up, I recently heard someone say, if your community is an area where people who are working in your restaurants, who might be your service folks, or people who are helping provide other services in your community can't also live there, that you don't actually live in a community, you live in a theme park. And I have not gotten over that and cannot stop thinking about how interesting that is to
I know. I
see.
want to write that one down too.
Yeah.
There's so many good quotes.
I know it just was such an eye opener to me. And so I love the idea that we're looking at how to build community that matters, whether it's Mark with his sustainable communities, you know, that we're figuring out a different way to do things to build that feeling of community, because I do believe that that's really going to drive our resident experience in the future. I know there's a ton of data that shows that sense of community drives resident experience. So it's really interesting. One thing I think, and this is a big conversation going on in the comments, and I'm trying to keep up with all of it, but that is also driving that resident experience is there was a lot of talk of having folks who are specialized in a particular area and that specialization. So you guys talk to me a little bit about that. Did any of you pick up on that kind of new trend or key trend that's happening right now where we're hiring folks who are really specialized in a particular area?
Yeah, I remember a particular discussion around maintenance and hiring specialists in maintenance. So, like maybe HVAC or carpentry or some other disciplines. And so, because of a centralized structure, those experts were able to be deployed based on ticket type and really be more efficient. I think if I'm remembering properly, it didn't necessarily reduce, oh yeah, here we go. It didn't necessarily reduce cost, this centralization and specialization, but it improved efficiency and customer service.
Yeah. And I can't help but think, and I hope this isn't a stretch, I'm going to guess it might have been Ian Bingham who was talking about
It's
that.
from Bucking. It's from, yeah, I was like, hey, Jillian. Yeah.
Yes. Let me jump in.
Go,
Yes.
Jillian, go.
So Ian was on that panel, and I'm heavily involved in that pilot as well. And it is really interesting as we try to find people that do have these specialized roles. And, you know, it's like finding a unicorn for someone that is in the space that you need them, especially when it can't be a remote role and it needs to be feet on the ground, of finding the person who's happy doing, you know, that particular task and they want to specialize in it. And it's definitely true, and it falls into the conversation about what does centralization look like for everyone. Is it finding, you know, the best people, providing the best experiences? Is your goal to cut costs? Is it to figure out, you know, recruiting woes and keeping, you know, positions filled? And I thought that was, you know, that's something that I'm living, but it's an interesting conversation of, you know, what does that look like for everyone?
Yeah.
And will the specialist role really gain speed in the industry? Can we kind of reformat that? Because so many of our roles are generalists.
Yeah, I think that is such an interesting thought to have, because I can imagine when we're all also struggling a bit with employment trends currently, that letting people specialize or do their specialty more, it's got to create value for them. So I love that kind of the running theme through here is a niche, right? Whether it's the person's niche of what they're good at, or it's building communities that really cater to a niche resident. Like, it really seems like we're getting to personalize things more, not just our service, but our communities, personalized for our employees. And we're getting back to that instead of this one size fits all, change you to be what we want. And now we're starting to really figure out how to do things well for everyone. And hope I don't take this too far, but it seems like we're getting a little bit of our humanity back, right? Like recognizing what people do well and figuring out how to make a difference with our residents. I love that overall for everyone. I joke a lot that my specialty is folding clothes, but if I have to put them away, absolutely not. So if anyone's specialty is that, y'all are welcome to come visit me in Texas.
Well, we'll just have to figure out a solution. That's your
see?
frustration.
Yes,
We need
here's the
innovation to
frustration. We
fix
need a
it.
solution. Yes, I'm your girl to fold. I don't put away. So anybody who wants to help. But I do really, really think this is such a really cool piece of our industry. And I think it's being driven by data. Data is telling us that we need to specialize in a lot of instances. Mark, do you have anything to say about this part?
I think it's in the scope of the question. I really think, and you see it in a lot of businesses now, particularly B2C businesses, kind of a C-level suite role of a customer experience officer, or a chief experience officer, somebody who's at the table driving the reorientation of the business from the customer out instead of, say, from the asset back to the customer. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's certifications and expertise in that area that combine everything from marketing to data to just kind of the interpersonal aspects of interacting with the public. And so I think more, as a lot of the leasing and touch points and centralization become, as maybe they move a little bit away from the customer, still finding ways to get those touch points back in a different way. I spent 25 years in banking, and we went through centralization, 20 years ago. And what happened is there was this whole concept of kind of retail stores where it took much more of a retailing environment. So the people that you hired on the front end had customer service skills because you reoriented the business around that. It seems like we're there in the business whereas as you centralize, you still need those touch points and somebody to kind of lead that initiative, and kind of a CXO, a chief experience officer, kind of fits that in my mind.
Yeah, we're seeing
if you're able to do it.
I actually, we talked about that. That was a huge conversation we had recently on LinkedIn, is seeing the rise of these positions being created and how much is changing around that. And I love it. For one, I'm completely here for it. And I think this is being driven by, we got automation, and now we're able to use that automation and personalize it and really make it better. I believe, and I'm going to shout her out a little bit, but I believe Lisa Trozine is one of the people who went to shop a ton of apartments in the not so distant future, recent future. She was looking and she got the exact same message from, I want to say, like 50 different apartment communities that got back to her with the same verbiage, same message. And she was talking about the importance of personalization, throughout the entire process of leasing and residence, and how much it matters. So we automated, cool, right? That was great. Now we got to take that next step and personalize and specialize. So I think we have a long way to go, but we're getting there. And it's a great thing to see. So y'all, really quick, as you're continuing your education from all these amazing things you found, like, what's your next resource, or what's the thing you're looking for? How are you going to keep learning about all these neat things? What do you recommend to everyone? Is it a book or a podcast or another conference, or you're just looking up some really cool piece of technology? What's the thing you're going to keep digging into later?
There's so much.
There's so much.
There's so
I think I haven't even started on the follow-up, and I think there were so many great conversations, but to actually like dive into some of these products and ideas and kind of see the bigger picture of them, I'm excited about. And I think, kind of removed from the conference, but just for everyone, I think that, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but things are evolving all the time. What you have right now might not be the latest and greatest. So, take the time to do the research and be on top of, what else is is out there, what technology is emerging, so that you can go back to your suppliers and your partners and ask those educated questions and figure out how to make things work best for what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Jillian. I know you touched on it earlier, but that even if you found a solution, looking at the demos or looking around and saying, hey, there might be some other things out there. Maybe not that you're changing your supplier or your vendor, but how is this problem being solved in different ways that might work in different markets? It's always important to
you can go to demo day.
Oh, yeah. Demo. I didn't care to say that, you guys. That's natural, organic.
Yes,
shout out
said it. Said it.
Delightful. What about you guys, Anne, Mark? Do you have something you want to keep learning or keep looking into, or something that you use to continue to educate yourself?
I mean, I think I would say, again, I was kind of on this brand journey. It started when I went to AIM, and it's continued, so I feel like I keep picking up knowledge about topics that I'm interested in throughout the year. But I think I would say that at least from Blueprint, that I would feel comfortable reaching out to people that either were on panels or that I met during the conference. And so I think that that's an important distinction, is that I feel like I have resources in my pocket that I can continue certain conversations with. And I think that's really special. I think there was an app that I talked about before, for easy kind of connection and communication. I have a lot of contacts now. They had a little button on the badge that you could connect with people. And so I think that's nice. I feel like if I wrote to someone, I was like, hey, this is Anne from Blueprint, and we were talking about whatever, can we continue the conversation? I feel like I would get a response back.
Yeah.
So that's a resource that I'm going to lean on very heavily coming out of this conference.
I love that. I love that we're solving problems and we're not getting stuck any longer in our even geographic silos.
Yes.
I've always been a big advocate for all of our associations, which I love, and they have such value. But man, there's something incredible about meeting someone from a different area or a different size metro or I know there were some folks from Canada who joined us. Tell me all about it. What's happening in Canada? I want to know, right? I'm sure there's some multifamily innovation going on there. And that is just invaluable, solving problems with other executives. Mark, anything that you're looking forward to next to educate?
Yeah, I think maybe just to be consistent in some of the other things I've said, we are working with a couple providers on the energy as a service side.
Yeah.
So taking some of our renewables, geothermal and solar, particularly on site, and integrating them on the data side. And so this Nemetschek group that presented on the digital twin piece, I'd like to explore that a little bit and just figure out whether it's solvable, both from a cost standpoint and from an execution standpoint, meaning do we have a team that could do it? It sounded manageable as it was presented, but I don't really know. He shared a study from Deloitte that I think 67% of companies are looking at on the property side are looking at some type of platform for digital twins, but implementation is slow. So I'm interested in exploring that because I'm hoping we can be a bit nimble and do what I described earlier. So that's a big takeaway for me.
Well, y'all, I cannot thank you all enough for joining us. I know I feel like instead of the Grinch where his heart grows 3 times bigger, my brain just expanded so much. This is incredible conversation. I'm going to have to take the afternoon to go down all of these rabbit holes because that's what I do, right? And then what? This is incredible. Let's learn more. But you all were a delight. Thank you for joining us. And everybody in our audience, thank you so much for being with us and listening and learning. We'll have another action agenda after OpTech. Again, I saw Paul said the next thing he's doing is attending OpTech. So if you're there or you can't be there, join us for the action agenda after OpTech, because we'll be doing the same conversation where we talk about what we learned and our key takeaways with some folks. It'll be incredible. And we look forward to having you there, Jillian, Mark, and you three are a true delight to get to talk to. And I just love surrounding myself, Jillian, as you said, with, being who you are, who you hang out with. And I feel like I got smarter and brighter today. So thanks so much. You were wonderful.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks, y'all.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.